Actual Fluency Podcast, episode 41 with Christopher Huff.
Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast, the podcast that gives you the tools and inspiration to learn languages faster and more efficiently. And now your host, Chris Broholm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. I'm Chris Broholm, as per usual, and I want to thank you for joining me once again on a Friday evening. It's 8 p.m. Central European Time. If you're listening to this just as it goes live, and if you listen to this at any other time, that's fine as well. I wanted to start the episode by wishing you all a very, very Merry Christmas to those people who celebrated. And I want to thank you for listening all through the year. And I'll definitely keep doing these episodes. And I love hearing from you guys. So if you have any feedback, any kind of questions, comments, people you'd like to see me interview on the show, you're very welcome to send me an email, chris@actualfluency.com. And today's episode is kind of special. I know I say that a lot, but this is really special because this is one of the first people who I sort of interacted with in the Polyglot community when I found out about it about a year ago. And today's guest was somebody I was talking to. We had kind of the similar attitude towards language learning, and it wasn't long after we met, sort of virtually, that we started an online language learning, almost like a talk show, and it was on Google Hangouts, and it was called the Chris and Chris Language Hour. And we had a few people join us every week, and we had a lot of fun with it. And then we couldn't really grow it past sort of 5 to 7 people every time. And whilst we did enjoy doing it, it was also quite time consuming either way. So we stopped it. And basically since then, I started the podcast and started interviewing people. I knew that I wanted to get Chris on because he has been doing languages for a long time, much longer than me. And he has a lot of kind of interesting perspectives. And more interestingly, he recently moved to China and in a sort of a teaching position. And he's also learning Chinese. So that was very interesting. And of course, the problem is when a person moves abroad like that and has many new things to do, it's kind of hard to get in touch with them. So that's why it's taking me 40 episodes to get him on. But today I'm excited to bring him on. And before I let the interview segment run, I just wanted to apologize in advance for the audio quality of this episode. And I know there's been a few episodes where the quality also has been kind of questionable, I would say. And, it is my utmost ambition to create the best possible quality of this podcast. So, I know how it feels. I listen to podcasts all the time, and I know that if the quality isn't great, it's hard to listen to. But the problem I'm having is that it's out of my control. If I want to have guests on, and particularly language learners are kind of all over the place. They might be traveling, they might be in a hotel lobby or in a room, and they might have a poor microphone or something. Those are the conditions I can't really control. Of course, I encourage all of them to have a headset, with a decent microphone. But the problem today is not really related to microphone. It's the fact that there's a little bit of a noise coming, a bit of a disturbance, but it's only for half of the episode roughly, and then it clears up by itself. I've tried to edit the episode in post-production, tried to run it through a few filters to try and see if that helped, but I'm afraid it's still there, and I apologize in advance. And there's also a bit of echo coming from the other side. So again, I always have, every single week when I've recorded an episode, I always have this horrible decision of whether or not an episode is good enough for you guys. And most of the time they are. And I think this week it's borderline. It's very close. But on the other hand, I also really think that the discussion I had with Chris in today's episode was really great and worth having. We get into Toki Pona, we get into polyglot gathering, we get into the community feeling, methods and all around those areas. So I think it's well worth listening to. And like I said, bear with me this time. It's the quality isn't perfect, but hopefully you will forgive me for it and enjoy listening to me and Chris's discussion on this week. And that's about it. Merry Christmas again, and have a great last of 2014. And if you're listening to this in the future, well, I hope New Year was good to you. And I'll see you in the next episode 42. All right. Today I've got a very special guest, and I know I say that a lot, but this time it is a very, very special guest. He's one I used to do a language learning show with called the Chris and Chris Language Hour, and he was actually one of the first people I met in the sort of community, and we started talking and exchanging ideas for that. And then we later got to stay in the same room at the Polyglot gathering, and we became quite good friends. So today I'm very happy to welcome onto the show Mr. Christopher Huff. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thanks for the nice introduction. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm fantastic. And you're, of course, calling from Beijing, China.
Yes, Beijing, China, not to be confused with Beijing, Germany, or Beijing, Greece.
I never know. There might be one in America. They seem to have a lot of copy cities over there.
They do. They have an Athens in my home state.
Yeah.
Athens.
I've seen London as well.
Yeah, London as well. It's Canada has London. Anyway, yes, calling from China.
Yeah, you're calling from China. We've only recorded for about a minute, and we already went off topic. So I guess we can put the disclaimer in now that we rant a lot and we talk about what we feel at the moment. So we might start at one place and end up somewhere completely different. But
sure,
beauty of the show. But anyway, Chris, I met you about a year ago, almost, maybe a little less, and you're from America?
I am from America, the Southeast.
And that's what people probably know about you at this point. So if you could just take a moment to, how did you get into learning languages, and how did you come up to, let's say, this year so far?
Oh, man, wow. It's a great story. Strap in. It's really a great story.
Okay, just the Cliff Notes then.
Okay, Cliff Notes. Well, I was a teenager, and I fell in love with someone from Romania. And this young lady, I thought I could win her heart. So I asked her how, and she said, well, it would help if you learned Romanian. And she thought this was a lark. I'd never actually do it. But I said, okay. So I ran to the bookstore, picked up a Romanian dictionary, Teach Yourself Romanian, went home, pored over it, and promptly realized that she wasn't serious. But what happened was my feelings about her faded away, but my feelings for language and my passion for learning them stayed, and it's still here now, about 9 years later. I went from language to language. One of the first ones I learned was Esperanto, and that helped me realize that grammar is not that scary, really, in any language. It just takes some time. And right now I'm in China, so I'm trying to study Chinese, and it's, very different from anything I've done before, but that's how I got into it.
Oh, fantastic. I've actually never heard that story before. That's a nice little exclusive there.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And Esperanto, yeah. I remember you were one of the people who were kind of pushing the con languages at the Polyglot gathering, and you were one of the reasons that I tried to explore it as well. And I definitely also saw the benefits of learning Esperanto in terms of grammar. But do you think it's good for particularly English native speakers because the grammar is so maybe non-existent? It's good to get an Esperanto to bridge that little gap into more advanced grammar.
Yeah, I do. I think that Esperanto helps people in a way that learning Latin in school used to help English speakers. So long time ago, not that long ago, really, English speakers used to learn Latin in school compulsorily, or Greek, one of the two. George Washington, for example, he had to study Latin in school. And I think it opened your mind to grammar concepts that are not native to your own language, but it was using a language that isn't spoken as widely.
Yeah,
to say the least. For Latin, Esperanto is obviously spoken more, but I think now Esperanto is like a way to open your mind to languages, especially from like Western Europe, that have a lot of similar things. Like they have some similar sounds, like the vowel sounds are the same and that sort of thing. But the grammar is the important part. It can really open your mind. Esperanto can also open your mind with some of the grammar to Russian too. because many words in Russian work the same way as Esperanto words. And that comes from the creator of Esperanto being a linguist himself, a polyglot also himself. But Esperanto fills an important role in the same way Latin used to, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. Can I just ask you, there's some crackling on the line. I don't know if it's your headset or something. Just try to... I don't know if it's the way you're moving your arms or something, but there's a noise that keeps coming back.
Problem solved.
You're on it? Good. Perfect.
Problem solved.
All right, that's cool. And I know for a fact that when we started talking about a year ago with the language hour we were trying to do and all the other projects, I know for a fact you like to sort of skip between languages and sort of, maybe not get into an intermediate stage in each. Can you explain a little bit how that process was back then, and has it changed till today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So when we first met, it was almost a year ago, I think, and I was really jumping between them because I really wanted to leave nothing out. It was kind of like playing with certain toys and you feel bad about the ones on the shelf.
Right.
So, but on my shelf, it's just a bunch of language books. And if I've got one in my hands, there's 10 more of different languages that I want to get to next. So it was really for that reason. I just was interested in too many things at once, and I wasn't very good about goal setting. Having moved to China, however,
right,
it's always right there in my face that I should be focusing on Chinese. And if I get tempted by Korean or Russian or any of the other languages I hear around here, if you can believe it, I tend to lose sight of the big picture. But being here has helped me focus more. I'd say it's changed in that way. I'm focused more on Chinese. Actually, having watched a video that a fellow language learner named Robin made, who's a mutual friend of a friend of mine, he made a video about his life in Japan as an expat, which is what I'm doing here in China. I'm an expat. And he recounted the story of learning Japanese for 3 or so years on his own, and then becoming an interpreter in Japan.
Yeah.
In Fukuoka, which is amazing. I thought it's incredible. But I realized that it takes an intense amount of vocabulary learning, which is something I never used to focus on, and a lot of commitment to one language at a time, which is also something I hadn't done. So those two things are pretty new, the vocabulary and the focus on one. Those are both new for me.
Right. There's still some noise going on, sorry, Chris. It's I know people are going to be a little bit annoyed with it's like, that static you get if you're messing with your microphone.
Oh, I promise I'm not.
Yeah, must be a technical problem then.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have to make do. Okay, and so you got to China. Tell us the story of how you got to China. Robin's story is also very interesting, and I can only recommend people listening to the podcast I did with him, which was episodes 9 and 10. And we talked for hours and hours, and that's why I had to split it into 2 episodes. But his story is truly fascinating. It's very interesting. But how did you get to China? And how did you get to China? I'm sure a lot of language learners are looking into possibilities of how to relocate.
Well, let me encourage anyone who wants to come to China, especially for language-related things, to come. You're always going to be welcome here. I mean, I've never met people more welcoming. Of course, I haven't lived for a long period of time in another country before, but I've really never encountered what I thought would be more or less hostile based on how Americans act normally towards foreigners that can't speak their language.
Right.
I thought they would be relatively hostile by no fault of theirs, but really it's an amazing place to be, an amazing place to live. I would say if you speak English, you can probably, I'd say definitely get an English language related job. If you don't have any skills that you are trying to find a job for in China, you can find an English language related job, even if you have an accent of some kind. I've known of people from Africa, people from Eastern Europe, people from South America, Australia, with not your typical accent for an English teacher, coming and being perfectly happy in an English teaching job here in China, which is what I'm doing here. So you may be happy there. There's also lots of job opportunities in other fields if you want to come and live here for a while and work in your field of interest, if it's not English teaching, which is pretty typical. But you'd be most welcome here, and it's a huge hub of languages. There's so many languages here. You would definitely never be bored.
Cool. But how did you decide to go to China in the first place?
Oh, yeah. Well, last fall, which I guess is more than a year ago, yes. I had set my sights on Prague. I thought, wow, the Czech Republic, what a perfect place to go and try and find an English teaching job to do a little gap year after college and find myself and all the rest of the things that people try to do when they travel for the first time. But I ended up with a list of a few different places that did not include Prague. I had Japan, Korea, Shanghai, Beijing, and Taiwan. And I almost went to Taiwan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Essentially what I did was I had a year of experience teaching various languages, most of all English, in my hometown. And I used that year of experience, which is like the minimum of what they want normally. And the certification that I acquired online didn't take much time. And just sent my resume all over. There were, I think, 42 different places that I sent it to.
Wow.
With all seriousness, I really did want to go to the places I sent them to. I didn't waste anyone's time.
Right.
A good percentage, a pretty hefty percentage responded one way or the other. And I was able to choose basically which place I wanted to go and focus my energy on the interview. And I ended up in Beijing for a number of reasons. One of them being it was near places I wanted to visit, like Japan and Korea. And I knew I probably couldn't learn Chinese alone. So I thought it would be really great to have the people around me helping and involved.
Cool. And did you have any preparation at home in terms of Chinese, or did you just say, I'm gonna cross that bridge when I get there and look into how to learn it, or did you prepare in any way?
Wow, most of it was the latter, I gotta say. But I did a little bit with the Roman alphabet version of the language. I didn't really learn any vocabulary or anything like that, but trying to pronounce words, I wanted that to be over by the time I came. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty much over by the time I came. People will tell you they've never mastered the tones if they're not a native speaker. They can try for 60 years and still find their tones are lacking.
Right.
But I don't really believe that, actually. I think you can do it. I certainly haven't.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't prepare too much, actually. And I'm starting to reap not the benefits, but the disadvantages of not preparing before I came. Just because there's the learning material here, there's not always a lot of it available unless you go to certain bookstores and that sort of thing. More or less, I'd say I'm doing most of the preparing after the fact.
Well, then it wouldn't be preparing, would it?
No, it's like catching up.
Yeah. So is this and this is why you're sort of giving it an extra, let's say, an extra effort now in the end of the year, because you felt like I didn't really do enough during the year.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I didn't prepare much before I arrived, but I arrived in July, and since then I've been studying pretty hard. Not nearly as hard as people who've inspired me, like Robin, for example. Not to mention him again, but he really inspired me, and hearing his story kind of changed my outlook on a few things with Chinese. One of them was I'm just going to take it really seriously. So since about October, maybe the end of September, I set the goal to learn 800 characters, recognition and writing them given the pronunciation and the meaning. I can write them and recognize them as well by Christmas Day. So today I'm at 714, but who's counting?
Right.
And I'm on track to finish. Christmas is not too far away at this point. So I think I'm going to make it. And when I do, I'm going to be sharing how I did it on my blog as well, which you can find by searching language Chris Huff. You can find it that way, very easy.
Sweet. And are you celebrating Christmas in China then?
Yep, I'll be celebrating Christmas with the saxophone-toting Santa Claus that adorns many of the shops here, singing Chinese songs.
That's hilarious. That's like a morphing of several different cultures and nice times.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe a lot of the Western things that I think you never see, and then they end up here. For example, the Chinese population loves the Transformers movies.
Oh, really?
Very popular here. And that was something I never thought. I mean, of all the things to make it to China, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's really
Anyway.
cool. What are some of the surprises that you've had coming into China? You know, you must have had a lot of ideas in your head on how it would be to live in China. What are some of the myths that you've sort of confirmed and that you've sort of totally denied and seen end up the other way instead of?
Well, I had heard that if you are a foreigner in China, you will have your picture taken many times, particularly if you're tall. So if you're above like 170 centimeters or so, you're probably going to have your picture taken because people want to pose with a foreigner and all of this. And I thought that was just like rubbish. You know, I thought, wow, this is such a patronizing thing to say. You know, China is a proud culture. They don't need to take a photo with a foreign person to prove anything. I thought it was very weird and patriarchal and false.
Right.
And then, and then on 3 or 4 different occasions, it's happened. And I don't think it's anything I did to merit such attention, but I just think it might be the way that we take a photo in front of the Statue of Liberty or a photo in front of, you know, some landmark somewhere. I think it's just a part of the traveling experience for them. So if someone's in China is taking a picture with you and like laughing and enjoying it, probably they aren't too interested in you. They probably just want to show off the picture as part of their travels. Like, look at this exotic person that I saw when I was traveling. Right. They're probably not in their hometown, you know.
Tall Godzilla person.
Right, exactly. This tall, lanky, a little bit overweight gentleman.
Yeah, who claims to not have done anything to merit this attention, but is probably making a fool out of himself everywhere.
Right, thinking that it's all him. Like, oh, of course, you can take a picture. Do you want an autograph too?
Well, that's how we are, I suppose. Vanity, but it's nice. Any other sort of myths that maybe you've confirmed or?
Yeah, actually, for some reason, people spread a rumor around that Chinese grammar is really, really easy. And I have a Chinese grammar book here beside me, and it's not very small. I would say Chinese grammar doesn't have as many things to memorize, like declension tables, like Czech or Finnish or Russian or something like that, that we're used to calling. That's what the grammar is. It's remembering endings or remembering verb aspects or something difficult. It is difficult. But Chinese has unique challenges, even in the grammar, that make it still quite difficult, I would say.
Right.
That's been surprising. I thought it was just going to be, 1, 2, 3, I want pie. I can speak Chinese.
Right.
But it's not that way at all. I'm learning more every day how ignorant that is.
Right. I guess even some people struggle with the grammar of Esperanto, which is about as simple as it can be. So this shows you that grammar is a sort of a concept. And of course, you can have harder grammars, but, no.
Yeah, people love to hate on grammar. I don't know why I love it. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, tell me about that. Yeah. You used to really enjoy that. I remember we talked about that a lot, and I said I detest it, and you said, "Oh, I love doing it." Oh, where did that come from?
It's still true to a degree, but it's not too useful. Like, because now that I've come here and changed my goals and hopefully grown over the past 9 or 10 months, my focus has shifted. So I still enjoy grammar, but not everything I do in language learning now is because I want to enjoy myself. I've got specific goals now that I want to meet. And if I want to meet goals of speaking Chinese or speaking enough Korean to travel there soon or something like this, I have to have words, and you can't put the vocabulary, or you can't put grammar on a flashcard easily.
No.
But you can put the vocabulary and use it right away. And if your grammar's not, at least you can get to the train station and find your way home,
Yeah,
it's very different. Yeah, exactly. Making a mistake, not an issue. In fact, it's probably good for you. As our friend Benny has taught us many times.
Yeah.
You want to make a goal of making mistakes as often as you can, because those are when you learn something new.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's really cool. And, what are your plans for the new year? Any spectacular goals or?
Well, now I have to ask you, which New Year?
Oh, right.
The Chinese one or the?
Well, I was thinking about the Western one, which is coming up in about 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, the Western one. Actually, this is important. Good question. I think for the new year, I've got a resolution for the first time.
Oh, yeah?
And and I think it is going to be this year, 2015. I will put my headphones in a drawer and not touch them in until 2016. New Year's 2015 will be the year where I put my headphones in a drawer and lock it and don't touch them again until 2016. And the reason is I have colleagues and I have friends and people that I've encountered who did not learn Chinese the entire time they were here. And maybe they stayed here for 5 years. I met one gentleman who's a businessman who'd been in China for 32 years, and he still could not speak Chinese.
Wow.
And the only reason that could possibly be is that he did not speak to Chinese people in Chinese. He didn't try. And the times that I don't try are the times when I'm listening to music or listening to your podcast or listening to something, and I've got my headphones are in my ears, blocking me from this world of people that I could be communicating with, befriending even. I could be making some relationships, and most importantly, for my goals here, learning some Chinese and becoming a better speaker. So I'm not speaking when I'm listening to music, and I'm not listening either.
Right. Yeah.
I'm wasting my time.
I think that's a brilliant one, actually, and I think a lot of people could do with that. You know, sometimes I have headphones in, and this obviously, you know, when I live in Denmark and there's Danish people around, it's limited as to how much language practice and enjoyment I can get out of that. But sometimes I just wear headphones to block people out because they're talking about, you know, what, I don't know, Strictly Come Dancing or some stupid TV show on Big Brother or something. I just want to block the world out, you know, at that point. Yeah. But at another point, sometimes I don't do it. And I see some people they just every single day, they just wear those headphones and they have it on like, you know, Slayer or something, like really loud heavy metal or something. I don't even know what that is. And it's like, it's so loud that when I hear my music, which is, you know, not to be too civilized or anything, but it's quite nice music. It's not noise.
Right.
I can hear, I can't hear my own music for theirs. Then I know that they're absolutely not gonna do anything in life, pretty much, you know. So I think it's
not
a good
with your headphones. They're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they couldn't even, you know, if there was an aerial attack on Denmark, they wouldn't be able to hear the sirens because they're so loud, and they just destroy their ears. I mean, that's one point, right? They just destroy their ears. They're gonna get bad hearing, and they're gonna maybe even lose it. And I just think that it's stupid. But the point that I'm trying to make is that some days I will just take the headphones off and I'll just sort of sit and watch out through the window or listen for, you know, I don't know, bird song or any kind of thing, stimuli. So I think that's a very good point that you're making, is particularly if you move to a country where you're trying to learn the language. I mean, you don't learn it by locking yourself up in your room all day and listening to music every time you go out. And I think somebody like Robin would probably echo this sentiment, because he said that one of his problems was that he was sort of stuck in his room just doing Asimil or something for 10 hours a day. And he got to a great level, but I think that was more due to his, you know, he had a job and he had a social life that way. But some people might not be as fortunate. So I think this is quite a good resolution. I was expecting something, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna do 2,000 characters or something, or kind of
something flippant.
Finish Asimil with ease or something. No, that's cool. That's cool.
Well, one more word on that. I found personally, even if you're not in another country, which many of us aren't, right, and you still have language learning goals, I found that when I have my headphones in, almost always it is idle time. It's not time I'm spending working hard on something.
Yeah, you're right.
Almost always. Like, you can obviously have music playing in the background if you're doing your flashcard or doing memorize, whatever. You can have music playing and put your headphone. But for my own personal goals, I wasn't meeting them if I had my headphones in. So I'm just killing them. I'm killing them in next year.
That's perfect. Yep. And obviously not going to buy any more Michel Thomas and Pimsleur, I suppose.
Or just listen to him on the loudspeakers.
Right. Carry your laptop around with you on the loudspeakers.
Like a boombox on my shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking exactly that, yeah. No, I think that if you're in the country and there's so much opportunity for input, I don't think the audio courses are of such high value as if like for instance, where I live, it's very hard to find Russian speakers, for instance. Then I think the value of audio courses goes up quite high, quite a lot. Of course, they're always helpful, but I think if you're in the country, then you should probably at home focus on something like vocabulary that you can't just pick up in the street. You know, of course you can.
Right.
So I guess you can deduce it if you know all the other words around a word or all the other characters around a character. Or maybe you can't. Can you?
I can't.
Okay. That's good.
There's this little something I mentioned in the Q&A section of my Toki Pona talk in Berlin this year that I gave, and I still haven't tried it yet, but I want to mention it again just because it's been a while. And anyone listening to this, I hope you can understand what I'm saying. So in Toki Pona, you have the way of making compound words, and it's based on these 120 or so little building blocks, and you can make immense structures with them. But I believed in my Q&A that those little blocks are fundamental ideas about the world around you. And I would like to try this with a foreign language and only learn maybe 300 or 400, whatever is necessary, to be able to describe something perfectly, even if I don't have the vocabulary for it. So my memory is not strained to try to remember refrigerator, automobile, all these specific words. I can just describe, what does a refrigerator do? What does a car do? That type of thing. So the words you would have in your memory are like person, place, thing, vehicle, maybe, and then like question words, who, what, when, where, that type of stuff. But I wonder what your thoughts are about something like that. Do you think it's viable at all as an approach? Do you think it could work?
It's a very interesting approach anyway. I just, as you know, I just learned Toki Pona last week. And the approach of learning a minimal amount of words to describe the world around you is definitely, I'm just going to stay with interesting. And I think one of the approaches that I really like about speaking fast is sort of a hybrid between Benny Lewis and Moses McCormick, where Benny's like, trying to sort of, he's just basically, if you know one word in the language, go and say it to someone. And Moses is like, okay, if you go out and speak to a foreigner in that language, they're going to ask you some questions. So we're going to teach you the answers and the questions first, so you have a base to build on. And I think I'm going to take it one step further with the frequency tables, where if you learn the 500 most common words in a language, you have, 75% of written in the language. Obviously, it varies from language to language, but I think it was something like, 500 words accounted for 80% of the written normal level, which is completely ridiculous when you think about it. But of course,
it is.
It's not much use if you don't understand the last percentages, because it can be a bit misleading to think, oh, I understand 80% of the words. The problem is that the words that you don't understand are usually the most important for the sentence. Like that would be the nouns, or somebody would say there is a I don't know, a plane or something.
Or action verbs, like he blanked me, and you don't know what it is.
Exactly. So and you can't deduce those from the meaning, but whether or not we can sort of do it with real language, the whole deconstruction. First of all, I think it would be an amazing task to do. Like I think it would probably be PhD worthy in sort of linguistics, because you have to do so many considerations, and it's part of why Toki Pona is so impressive. I feel like is that how do you limit yourself that much, and how do you figure out how to limit yourself?
Right.
I guess you can use Toki Pona as an inspiration and try and translate, try and use those 120 words and see how far that gets you. But then again, I guess the problem is that every single Toki Pona word has like a handful of meanings.
Oh, so many. Yeah, so many. And different grammatical places too.
Yeah, they can be
noun, verb, adjective. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think if you...
Well, I see some problems. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to round it up by saying I think that the approach of getting the most used words or grammar rules first, I think is always going to be advantageous. So, for instance, the frequency lists, I only work with frequency lists because I don't think it's necessary to learn a word in an early stage that you might never use in, I don't know, hundreds of hours of speaking. Whereas then you don't know the word for house or something, it's like
Right.
a word you know all the time, or pronouns and stuff. So I would say if you could do some kind of a package, a bit like what Moses is doing. He has that FLR method. I haven't actually had a chance to take a closer look at it yet, but if you could package a foreign language into that. But I think that's kind of what Benny did, isn't it? He was kind of taking the basics first and learning those sentence fillers. So every time somebody asked you a question in the language, instead of just saying yes or no, you'd say, "It is of my humble opinion that," you just learn those fillers just to sound more interesting, right? And yeah, I think, and the real cool thing about this is that Toki Pona is kind of, it's the reason that we're having this interesting discussion on it in the first place. So even if it's a good or a bad idea, which I can't really evaluate, it's still interesting how this little almost silly language is sparking philosophical conversation in how to approach other languages. But yeah.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. Yeah. There's a big problem with the approach, I think, and it's that it doesn't help you become a good listener at all. Mm-hmm. And unless you find someone extremely patient that will explain every 3 or 4 words using the words you're going to probably have some trouble. I mean, if your goal is to go to a country for 3 days and use, just ask yes or no questions and ask how to get places, you don't really need that. It's like a philosophical little jaunt. You don't really need it at all. So I think those two are the main issues with the approach, but it's still interesting. I'd like to try it one day anyway.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Sort of build that package, the intro package. That could be interesting. But even though I just want to wrap up Toki Pona as well, because I just did it last week, so it's perfect. You did the talk in Berlin, which was incredible. I watched it. I didn't watch so much of it because I didn't want to learn too much ahead of the marathon that I was attending. I thought that would be cheating, so I only kind of just briefly looked at it, and it was quite impressive. I was trying to get to the actual talk on the day, and I couldn't get in through the door because there was so many people in that small classroom. And of course, it's perceived as quite a large success. So congratulations on that. It was definitely the talk of the gathering, I feel like.
Wow, thanks very much. That's very flattering. Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you didn't decide to cheat, because everyone that was in there watching my talk, they all walked out speaking fluent Toki Pona. So I'm very
right. Yeah,
it's not true at all.
But yeah, no, they definitely didn't know all of the vocabulary. But of course, that doesn't take long. On
it's a pretty expansive list.
Right. No, it's a nice list, but it's nice that like I just wrote on the blog recently. It's just, it makes you think, and it was really interesting to sort of, every time I tried to say something in Toki Pona on the first day, I was trying to say, okay, I have this English phrase in my head, like, in my opinion, or I don't know, I would like to do this or something. And then, I was trying to find the corresponding Toki Pona, the translation for that sentence or those words uniquely. And I'm pretty good with memorizing a limited amount of vocabulary, particularly when it's not Russian. But the thing that I realized halfway through was that instead of trying to translate word by word, you need to first find out, okay, what are you actually trying to say? And I think Toki Pona is fantastic at trying to reduce what you're trying to say to its bare minimum. Like, just the fact that you can't say we or us, that you have to say I, which is, it's an interesting when you think about it, because obviously there's a difference in the meaning and everything. But at the end of the day, you are part of we, or us. So if we want to do something, then you want to do something, right? And then in essence, the choice of pronoun is just sort of a liberty, or just a perk. Because at the end of the day, saying I want to do this, with it also mean that the entire group wants to do it. I mean, that's just one example. There are tons of examples of where you need to really reduce things. And for Russian, it's already helped me to look at things and not try to translate directly, which I think is a common beginner mistake. It's definitely been a problem for me, also in Esperanto, where I just try to, okay, I have this English sentence in my head, trying to translate it, and usually fails because that's just not how language works. You can translate an idea,
Right.
but you can't translate a sentence by sentence, or you can sometimes if you're lucky, but then it usually sounds bad as well.
Right. Yeah. That I've had the exact same experience with Chinese, because I realized even in talking to people that are learning English as part of my work here, that there's so much grammar in English that makes a sentence good or bad English that isn't necessary at all to convey the meaning.
Right.
Like, you know, a Chinese native will speak English and say, "How different?" like as a question.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, is no. And I know exactly what they're saying.
Right.
And it's hard for me to even, correct them. Like, obviously it's my job and I do it, but I don't feel really like a need to correct them because there was no problem. We communicated.
Mhm.
There was no problem. And it's all the grammar is such a big part of the language. It's not always necessary for conveying the meaning, but that's what you're talking about, where I think the sentence translation, if you try and do that, the grammar is all wrong and strange and foreign, but you can still put the words in order and it might work, but it's just not grammatical. That's why I think there's some problems with translating like that.
Yeah, and it also requires a lot higher ability in the target language. If you want to say, oh yeah, it would be my utmost pleasure to accomplish this task for you. That's speaking kind of in a sort of a fancy way. But if you think about it and try to wear the Toki Pona glasses, and you just distill that into the basic elements, and then you translate it. Then you translate it, and then suddenly you realize that you don't need a lot of fancy vocabulary. You just need the basics, and you're speaking. And I think if you haven't tried Toki Pona yet, I can definitely recommend it. And learning the vocabulary for me took less than, I did the 120 words or whatever. I think I did that in less than an hour. Of course, some of them didn't stick after that hour, but I would say like 90% of them did. And using them in sentences on the same day that I learned it, and then reviewing the course next day, I felt that I kind of knew all of the vocabulary. Of course, you have compound vocabulary as well. You can, so there's some agreed terms that mean something very specific. But if you know those 120, you already have the thing. And then I would just recommend trying to translate from English into Toki Pona. Realize how you can distill the meaning down to the core elements, and then translate into your target language. But you need some experience. I feel like at the first few sentences we were doing, I didn't feel like I was getting that experience. So you need to work on a fair few sentences, not hundreds, but need to put a few hours into trying to translate. And then you suddenly start to understand that, or maybe even start speaking. If you can find some Toki Pona speakers, try to speak. And then you realize that you can distill these concepts, these sort of complex sentences that you had, you can produce them in your new language, and it won't require that advanced vocabulary. Instead of trying to get it, because I've had this a lot before. Right? I'm thinking I want to talk to someone in Russian. We're talking, and I have this sentence in my head. I'm always preparing the next sentence in my head.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do that as well. And
maybe not listening while you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at both, but
okay.
And then I'm like, oh fuck, I don't know what that word is, and it's like there's this one word I'm missing, and it shouldn't collapse the whole conversation, but it kind of does. So if you could kind of make your sentence simpler, then I think that's a big win. So I'm very surprised at the usage of Toki Pona, I must say. I was very skeptical. You probably remember me from.
Yes, I do.
But through a lot of random coincidences, I have now managed to take it on. And I would say I wouldn't learn it for speaking it or writing it or communicating with it, but just for realizing how other languages work. I think it's quite a priceless experience.
Absolutely.
To be honest, I don't know if you have any last remarks on Toki Pona.
Yeah, I do. I'd love to share with you something about Toki Pona that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah?
Yeah. It betrays my ignorance about certain stuff. Most things, probably. For instance, there are so many words I know in my native language that I have a vague association kind of idea about what they are. I'll use an example, betray my ignorance about cars and how they work.
Uh-huh.
So I know the word carburetor, I know the word piston, I know the word antifreeze, and all of these things. But imagine if I tried to act like I knew what I was talking about in Toki Pona.
Yeah.
There's no chance. No chance. I could pretend and use some little words in English and everyone would think, wow, he knows about cars, haha. And I can kind of wipe the sweat off my forehead and get away with it. But in Toki Pona, there's zero chance. I don't even know where to start because I don't know what they actually are.
Right. Or what they
Very
do.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one important thing to say about Toki Pona as well, for those people who don't know it at all, is that it's not a perfect language, and it's not, it's not scientific in any way. It was just the brainchild of a person from Canada, and at the end of the day, you can't really make it. I hesitate to make it sort of a holy text or anything, a way to discover the meaning of life, even though that is what Sonia likes to call it. And I appreciate it if you're making the language that it can be a journey of self-realization. But I think for the most of us, it's just, a little fun thing. And if it helps in any way, which I think it does, then I think it's worth doing because it doesn't take any time. And of course, you're free to write it on your name card at the next conference. TP as well. It's hard to talk in, though, I feel.
That's true. Oh, even harder to listen.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Is the problem, I think.
Very difficult. Oh man. I was so grateful that my friend Joop Kieft, who's the other voice answering the questions for me in the presentation video, he is, I think, just a remarkable language learner to start with.
Yeah.
But his Toki Pona, I mean, he can listen and speak like I've never seen. Of course, there aren't very many opportunities to listen to Toki Pona or speak it. But wow, he seemed not to have any trouble at all.
Yeah.
I was amazed by that. But I think there's a certain level you can reach. But with Toki Pona, I think that at the next conference, which I will be happy to announce that I'm attending.
Woo!
If anyone has Toki on their name card at that conference, I may not look too long in your direction, hoping to use it. Take your time with me, is what I'll say. Take your time.
Right. Be patient. Be patient. Yeah, and me as well, I would say. Just because I learned it last week, it's really hard to use in practice because it all sounds the same. The syllable structure is the same. It's hard to make out the different words. And then you have to, of course, modify every word, and the modifier comes after the head. So it's like, it's hard to follow. But anyway, it's been great to talk to you again. We obviously had our little show at the beginning of the year, and who knows, maybe we'll review that in due time.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Be fun if you when you get back to a more stable connection where we can actually show video as well, and then go back to do sort of a weekly show. But yeah, there's always so much to talk about, and I think maybe it'll be interesting for people to look at the old language hours. So I think I'm gonna put them out on the blog, I think, and then people can watch them, because also an interesting point about this whole language learning experience or the journey is that we change our minds all the time. Whenever we learn something new, whenever we see something new, try something new, read, even just hearing something new. And I think if you go back to, I haven't done it yet, but I imagine if we go back to some of those recordings we did when you were still living in America and I was just getting started, I think that they might be very different from what we've talked about today, and also what our verdicts are really. And I mean, we still say Benny Lewis all the time. I guess that's a chronic failure.
Not at all. I mean, I've been inspired by him and so many others. I'm happy to mention them every time, Yeah, I could talk about each of them for an hour each,
Yeah, I totally agree. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It was nice that you had the time to come on the podcast as well. I've been trying to get you on since I started the podcast, to be honest, but because you were traveling and, you were in China, unstable network conditions and everything. You were so busy in the beginning too. It was like I couldn't get a Facebook message to you for 2 weeks or something. And then suddenly I would just get a reply, oh yeah, well, what's up, dude?
Yeah, apologies there. Moving to a country where Facebook isn't as welcomed as other places tends to make it difficult.
Right. Maybe I should have sent you some other message instead of a Facebook message.
We'll figure it out as we go.
Exactly. Anyway, Chris, any last shout outs or... Yeah.
Just want to say the conference we've been talking about, if you don't know about it, it's a Polyglot gathering in Berlin. It happens from April 30th to, I think, May 5th each year. So far, it's been happening. This will be the second annual coming up in 2015. If you're hearing this, you are welcome to come. You do not need to speak many languages. We will be happy to have you there to learn as much as you can along with us. We'd be happy to see your face there and get to know you. And it's just a great time for anyone who loves languages. Anyone who wants to hear more about learning them and hear from people who love them just like you do. Please come. You're welcome to. You can sign up there at polyglotberlin.com and come and hang out with me and Chris anytime.
Yeah, definitely. And you're more than welcome to buy us a beer in the rooftop bar, which is a nice place to hang out.
I highly recommend that, by the way.
Awesome, Chris. Well, have a good Western New Year and a Christmas and a good Chinese New Year. That's a few months from now, but still, have a good time, and we'll be in touch.
I wish you the same. What a pleasure to talk to you again.
Thank you, and likewise.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. For more information, be sure to check out actualfluency.com. Until next time, enjoy learning and have a great day.